Tuesday, 9th August 2022. This is the second this and that for the day, and this is a very hefty one, so let's go. And we start off. Another confirmation that NATO is at war with Russia via proxy Ukraine. I insist, NATO insists decisively for more support. We need a constant flow of ammunition, heavier weapons, more advanced weapons. NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg. These guys, I don't know what they want to achieve in the end. It is quite clear. NATO as it is today is no match for the Russians. But yet they keep on poking the bear. And they will carry on. I don't know what the problem is. Why is NATO so belligerent? Don't they understand that if there's a war between NATO and Russia, Europe is going to become a heap of ash? But why do they care? It's the citizens that will die, not they. They will be happy in their ivory tower. But I've got a funny feeling if something should break out between Russia and NATO, the NATO headquarters in Brussels will be the first one to go up in flames. And then there's this. NATO can actually be disassembled quite easily. US citizens can do it without much help from the politicians in the same way that we stopped the Vietnam War. Here's the trick. NATO is literally mostly financed by the US. Most of the other countries owe its maintenance to the US, simply because they haven't been paying up for decades. Without the US, NATO has also no cohesion. There's no cohesion in the EU whatsoever. This could be seen during the COVID emergencies, when they were kidnapping equipment and meds from one another. Trump wants the US out of NATO. That is one of the main reasons why Hillary et al. Came up with the demonstrations against him, which stretched all the way to London. The same people organized BLM, thereby creating an artificial racism, which was in fact a color revolution. And there's a lot of truth in that. And I cannot understand why people don't want to accept. NATO is a major problem for the whole of the West. The neocons and the warmongers in the shithouse is using NATO to prod Russia. And I'm going to place the map again of NATO expansion. And you can look at it and think for yourself, if you were the Russian president, what would you think of these actions? I'm quite sure you would also have started to show your teeth. And then there's this one. The West made a mistake by not securing a neutral status for Ukraine, the co-chairman of the right-wing Alternative for Germany party. We must not forget about the situation in which this conflict arose. Ukraine has been considered a red line for decades. And she recalled that the Russian side had indicated for decades that it would not put up with Ukraine's integration into NATO. At least some of the Western politicians have no problems with memory. But, as always, her opinion will not get traction in the Western MSM. And that is why I am here. I'm showing you that there is other voices and other opinions. And then more from NATO, that's Stoltenberg. The masks have been dropped. For those who are not yet convinced that the war in Ukraine is a proxy war of the West against Russia, I insist, NATO insists, decisively for greater support. We need a constant flow of ammunition and whatever, we've read it before. This is the reality. Europe needs to wake up. And then we go to the Ukraine. Amnesty International report exposes Ukraine's violations of international law, deliberate use of civilians as human shields. The report has dealt a significant blow to the relentless war propaganda in the media and has provoked hysterical responses. And hysterical is understating it. That Zelensky and his Nazis in Kiev, they are in a flat spin about this. And I saw something ridiculous where Amnesty International now say they're sorry that they've caused so much pain and disturbance with the report, but yet they still at least stuck to their guns. And more from the Ukraine. Why military aid to Ukraine doesn't always get to the front lines. Like 30% of it reaches its final destination. What happens after US and NATO allies ferry weapons and military supplies across the border and into the hands of Ukraine? And this report also disturbed the Nazis in Kiev tremendously. And I've read a few other articles where are people that are trying to make it out that this was bullshit and all of that, but we know. And as I mentioned in a previous Skidmark, a lot of these weapons are going to find their hands into those waiting hands of those migrants that Europe so gladly imported into their communities. And still in the Ukraine. Zelensky is in big trouble. First Amnesty International, now the German mainstream media publishes evidence of a huge corruption and his direct involvement. In my opinion, his days are numbered from hero to zero, and I have to agree with her. I think the writing is on the wall for Zelensky. And then we get this. Russia eliminates foreign fighters in Ukraine. An airstrike has killed dozens of Ukrainians, International Legion, Russia MOD said on Saturday. Providing a daily update on the progress of the military operation, a high-precision strike was conducted by the Russian Air Force on the stronghold of the International Legion in the village of Voivodovo in the Dnipropetrovsk region. As a result, more than 80 foreign mercenaries and 11 units of special equipment were destroyed. Kiev's International Military Unit was created in late February at the request of President Zelensky. And this is sad, lots of human life lost, but let it be a lesson to the West. It keeps on encouraging their citizens to go and fight in Ukraine. And then there's this one. Please, we need your funding, we need your money, send more, so much more, support Ukraine. It was in Scotland today. And they highlight again the issue of the illegal weapons that lands on the black market. North Korea wants to test its attack drones in Ukraine, have offered equipment and troops as 100,000 North Korean soldiers want to come and help Russia fight the Nazis in Ukraine. They will bring along with them their MLRS artillery and latest drones to test on the enemy. This is an interesting thing. I wonder if Russia is going to accept it. I have seen articles where there is also a lot of people from North Korea that wants to come to the Donbass specifically to come and help with the reconstruction. So it seems to me that Russia is not so isolated as the West wants us to believe. And then again, Maria Zakharova. The Vladimir Zelensky regime has no intention of stopping its criminal activities. This fully suits Western countries, which have a unique opportunity to equip armies with new weapons by sending obsolete hardware to the Ukraine. And that is true. I read an article about some of the equipment that has arrived in Ukraine that is failing, or they can't get it going, or it doesn't want to pair up with ammunition and things like that. So yes, maybe the Ukraine is the dumping ground for all the old weapons from the West so that they can renew. Their problem is they still need to renew. And the military-industrial complex, I've seen an article yesterday, said 4 to 6 years to replace the equipment that was sent to Ukraine. They've got problems. Russia is ready to fight today, not in 4 to 6 years. In reality, Zelensky is playing with fire. If Putin is not really advancing with this war, it is only because of the civilians. But I think Ukraine itself has no respect for these civilians. The Russia must end it once and for all. There's a lot of messages about this. And then there's this one. Zelensky sold 17 million hectares of agricultural land in Ukraine to DuPont, Cargill and Monsanto, with large shareholding by BlackRock, Blackstone and Vanguard. Now the reason I post this is just so you can take note. I wonder what happens now to all that land that they bought and it is now under Russian control. I've got a funny feeling Russia is not going to acknowledge that ownership. And still in the Ukraine, Russia takes out 45,000 tons of NATO ammo. The Russian military has taken out a depot in southern Ukraine that stored NATO-supplied ammunition, the defense ministry claimed on Sunday. Now, you can read the rest, but this is what's happening there. The West pumps these things in, and Russia destroys it before it gets to the front line. Poor American and European taxpayers. You guys are paying for this. And here's that article that I referred to earlier. Amnesty apologizes after Ukraine pressure. International human rights group Amnesty International has issued an apology to the consternation triggered by its recent report, which among other things accused Ukrainian armed forces of violating international humanitarian law and endangering civilians. The organization has, however, refused to disavow its findings. And this is how pressure is being put onto anybody that says anything negative about that Kiev Zatsy regime. And here's something strange, but I saw a later article about it. Lebanon has lost a cargo ship with Ukrainian grain. The vessel Razoni, flying the flag of Sierra Leone, set off from the port of Odessa with 26 tons of corn on board. On August 1, the cargo ship was supposed to arrive in Lebanon on Sunday. The ship, which was waiting in the port of Tripoli, changed course before arriving at the originally announced destination, the Lebanese Minister of Public Works and Transport said. But I saw an article which apparently the buyer in Lebanon refused to take delivery of the corn because it was 5 months late. And then here is something that we all should take note of. Ukrainian Nazis need a nuclear catastrophe. Ukrainian troops fired at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant at night. The territory of nuclear fuel storage facility turned out to be in the affected area. Now, there is a lot of stories, and the Ukrainians, they say and claim that the Russians are bombing the place. Now, you must just ask yourself this. Number one, Russian soldiers are there to protect that installation. Russian technicians is in the plant to make sure operations run smoothly. Now, Russia has got full control over that nuclear power plant. So just tell me, why is Russia bombing itself? Think about it. And this is a little bit disturbing. Fragments of an American-made AGM-88 harm-guided aircraft missile, which is used to destroy enemy radars, have been found in the combat zone in Ukraine. This is the first documentary evidence of the use of such ammunition by the Ukrainian military, the transfer of which to Kiev was not previously reported. And this is how the Americans are smuggling weapons into the Ukraine. And they're going to pay for it in any case. But the fact of the matter is, every missile the Ukrainians fire off is one less that the Americans have, and one that they must replace, and which their MIC has already indicated will take 4 to 6 years. And then we go to the US. August 6 and 9 should be the days of Washington's repentance to humanity for the crimes committed against civilians. Vyacheslav Volodin, on the anniversary of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, recalled that the United States is the only country that has used nuclear weapons. Washington killed hundreds of thousands of civilians solely to show its power and intimidate the whole world. And this is true. And the reality is, the US has been involved in bombing people since World War II. Not a single year that they have not been in a war somewhere. They are the warmongers. They are the disturbance of the peace. They are the global terrorists. And more from the US. Americans see bleak economic outlook. It's the most pessimistic since the global financial crisis of 2008. suggesting that President Joe Biden has failed to convince voters that conditions is not so bad. And this is the old story. They lie about reality, but the facts overtake them. And the poor citizens just line up and take the shot. And then we get to this what the fuck. And it is actually hilarious. Air Force scientist hanged himself in his garage when he was threatened with exposure for tricking a colleague into hiring a really hot $400 an hour prostitute who could barely use a computer to work on a top military project. I read this and it's sad about the guy committing suicide, but I look at what he did. This is crazy, crazy, crazy. In any case, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and share the thing. Have a nice day.